Texas Longhorns quarterback Arch Manning was at SEC Media Days on Tuesday and gave everybody a masterclass on how to be a Manning. What does it mean to be a Manning? You carry yourself like you have been involved in the SEC football world since the beginning of time, no matter how young you are. Arch Manning is very clearly one of the most mature people I have ever seen, and he should be, by the way, because he's a Manning and he's the third generation of a Manning. Now, the big question you always have with players, I've always said this, working in media, when you cover business people, legacy people, third generation is always a generation where they fall apart. What do I mean by that? First generation comes from nothing. They appreciate what they have. They work too hard to get it. They instill those exact values in their second generation. The second generation then has the third generation and tries to instill the values in the third generation, but they can't impart the wisdom in the third generation of what it was like when they grew up because they didn't grow up like their parents. So then the third generation has no perspective whatsoever, and that's usually when things go awry. Again, the worst generation of legacy is always the third generation. And if you go back through history, go back to the Gilded Age, when you talk about the wealthy families and people like that, most of the wealth was squandered by the third generation. The third generation always squanders the wealth of family fortunes. That's how that works. However, Arch Manning said a lot of great things at SEC Media Days and did not give off the vibe that he was third generation. He is a 5-star. We know he committed to Texas, as Cam Newton said, to develop as a quarterback. He focused on that more than anything. And I'm not the biggest believer in Steve Sarkisian, the head coach who wins games, but I am a believer in him, the quarterback developer. He coaches the pro-style offense. He coached it in the NFL. That's what Arch Manning wants to learn. That's how Arch Manning wants to grow in this system. And I think Steve Sarkisian is going to do that for him. So we're going to play our second 4 downs of the day from Arch Manning showing humility by addressing expectations. And 4 downs brought to you by Ted Russell Ford. Once again, Cooper Mays asks you all to hit that like and subscribe button, and we bring you first down from Cooper Mays. Arch Manning asking about his height. Quote, "It's really weird. I really haven't deserved any of this. So just trying to play along and play ball." Now, I actually do believe that about Arch Manning. I think Arch Manning has gone out of his way to try to be humble. And I think he's really trying to emphasize the case that he wants to show that he's earning this and that he's not just a kid, another Manning. One of the ways he did that, I thought, was a misplay on his part, which was he didn't want to accept some NIL money for a while. Not because he was, or I think it was to not be in the first college football video game. And it wasn't because he was asking more money. He took this grandstand of, I don't want to accept money that I haven't earned yet. Now that I had a problem with. You're earning the money maybe because you're a Manning, but you also could be earning the money because you're a 5-star. People believe in you. Your talent's there. And you can afford to not accept the NIL money. And I think when you do that, you actually undercut people who may have accepted the money in the same situation as you. You set a precedent that almost places you above them on a moral stance. I did have a problem with Arch Manning doing that. I think that you need to accept the NIL money to a certain degree. He doesn't need it, but it's just to set a precedent. Okay, but overall, Arch Manning, you can very well tell he doesn't like getting too much hype because he doesn't want to be seen as the guy getting all the hype because he's a Manning. So he's insisting. He's trying to make it clear, I'm humble. I haven't done anything yet. I love him saying that. Second down is a beautiful response to Steve Spurrier. Remember, Spurrier being Spurrier, who obviously has his own feuds with the Mannings because, as we all know, Spurrier went, what was his record again? 3-0 against Peyton Manning. Didn't coach Eli. He didn't get Peyton Manning when he wanted him, and then he went 3-0 against him as a starter and made the jokes in the time when he said, I don't know why Peyton Manning came back for a senior season. He wanted to be 3-time Citrus Bowl MVP. A lot of trolling. You love that. He then said about Arch, he was talking about how Arch hasn't played a game yet. And then he said, if he's so good, why couldn't he beat out Quinn Ewers? A reference to joking about Arch Manning not being able to beat out Quinn Ewers last year. Arch, to his credit, responded to that and said, quote, Steve Spurrier is a great coach. And is he in the College Football Hall of Fame? Yeah, he's here. So I'm just worried about myself and trying to get better each day. That's that. Talk about brushing things off. You have got to love the way Arch Manning handled that. But speaking of Spurrier's comment, it does actually lead us to a third down from Cooper Mays, and it's about why Arch Manning chose not to transfer, because Arch Manning actually explained why he chose not to transfer from Texas, even though he was going to have to sit 2 years. By the way, he's a Manning. He's a 5-star. A lot of schools would have gone all out to take him. Staying for 2 years as a backup, many players and quarterbacks wouldn't accept. We give T. Martin a ton of credit for choosing to stay 2 years at Tennessee in the 90s. Arch Manning deserves the same amount of respect. His quote on why, though, just it speaks so highly of him. He said, quote, "The main thing was I wanted to be at the University of Texas. There's nowhere else I wanted to be, whether it was the school itself, Austin, my friends, the football program. So as long as I was continuing to get better at football and like where I was at, it was a no-brainer for me to stay." Now, yes, Arch Manning comes from a certain place of privilege where he can afford to just stay and focus on college and not NIL money. But Arch Manning is, because of that, because he's guided the right way, you can see what he's thinking. He's thinking only forward of the sense of enjoying the college life. What's the best chance to develop me as a player? And how can I go win games? It's a lesson for a lot of kids because, as John Calipari said, don't trip over nickels in search of dollars. Don't throw away the college experience or your NFL potential just for a few extra NIL bucks. Yes, that's harder for other people than it is for Arch Manning, but it still matters, and you got to give Arch Manning credit. 4 Downs brought to you by Ted Russell Ford. We are live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln studio.
A beacon of hope in a world of high prices. Look to the skies, Knoxville. Super savings is here. Ted Russell Ford is East Tennessee's #1 volume Ford dealer. Employee pricing is here. You pay what we pay on all new Ford models. Come see the super dealer today at either Ted Russell Ford location, Parkside Drive, or Kingston Pike.
And 4th down from Cooper Mays is this Arch Manning's quote on the SEC. Quote, "My family has played in the SEC." Well, that falls under the category of duh. But then he says, "I grew up going to SEC games, wanting to be a part of it. So now getting to represent at SEC Media Day, it's kind of a dream. I know I haven't done anything in the SEC yet, but that's the goal." This is the other final part about the Mannings. You can tell they genuinely love the SEC and respect the SEC more than anything else. Eli at Ole Miss, Archie at Ole Miss, Peyton at Tennessee, now Arch at an SEC school in Texas really stands out. All of them being from Louisiana, where LSU is. Arch Manning is, funny enough, the first quarterback to be coming out when LSU was a potential powerhouse. Back when Peyton and Eli were coming out, LSU was nothing. That kind of stands out, but you got to love that quote from Arch Manning. I'm going to say this up front. I think Arch Manning will try his best to stay humble. I think he's going to work out and be a very big success at Texas. I'm a big believer in Arch Manning. The way he carried himself at SEC Media Days yesterday, you question bringing him because he's not a senior, and I know Tennessee's one of the first that does that, but he hasn't started a game yet. But the way they handled it was just such class, and I think Arch Manning could break the third-generation stereotype that I have and could defy it. So we'll see how that all goes.